Welcome to RedShare Solutions project counting demonstration. This is going to demonstrate how to set up a project inside project counting. We're first going to set up the project maintenance screen. This is going to be the project information for each individual project that you're setting up inside RedShare Solutions project counting. First, have your project number. This is just pretty much a project ID that you want to keep track of so you know which project is which. You can determine how you want this ID to be. For this demonstration, we're just going to call it test. Then you have your project name. This is just a name that you can use on reports as well as to be able to find and kind of give it a better idea of what that project is. Then you have 3 lines that you can describe that project even more if you need to, so that way it gives you more understanding of what each project is if you need to keep track of that a little bit better. The next field on this one is the master project. This is the hierarchy of the projects. If you want to encompass more than one of these projects into one project so you can have a better reporting purposes as well as invoice from one master project on each individual project, you can use the master project. It's basically just the same stuff, project number, and setting that same stuff up. This allows you to invoice as well as to see the status of all the projects you have underneath. You could have 3 projects and 1 master project. That way you can see all the information, all 3 projects at once, and kind of get a better understanding of how those 3 projects are going based on that master project. For this demonstration, we're not going to use master project. Then other fields on here is customer PO, project budget, start date, and due date. These are all just reporting purposes fields, but the starting date and due date are also going to be used into one of the profit reckon routines at percent elapsed time. This allows you to recognize your profit over periods of time that you designate in these 2 fields. Then your customer ID. This is pulling from your customer maintenance on Microsoft's GP part. And I'm just going to pull in one of our customers. So you can see this will zoom back onto Great Plains customer maintenance screen, and you can set up the project or the customer on that side as well. The project class field, this is a field for reporting purposes that you can allow you to tie in based on that project class. Kind of like the master project, but this is just where you can tie in a bunch of different projects underneath that class and be able to determine which projects that you need to and which projects you don't. So that's kind of what the project class field is used for. And your division, this is where all your accounts, this is an important field. This is where your accounts are going to be coming from. The division is basically setting up all your account information for each transaction that you do. If you do a timesheet, expense claim, payables, or purchase order, they're going to be pulling from these different fields or different accounts that you're using. And we have information on these accounts when we set these up to help you determine which accounts go where and which aren't. Project manager, this is used for timesheets mainly and reporting. That way you have a project manager assigned to this project. You can approve those timesheets underneath his particular project, so that way he knows a better understanding who's putting time and costs against his project. Then client contact and division, these are reporting fields. They allow you to put the client contact and division that they're associated with that project, so you can have more information about that particular project. And then then you have your choice of project currency. This allows you to pick what type of currency type that you want this project to be. And ours is going to be, we're just going to make this Canadian project. And this exchange rate is based on the user date, so whenever you're pulling that in. And your site ID, this is the inventory field. This allows you to see what site that inventory is going to be transferred or using when it's using for inventory purposes. When you're creating purchase orders out of this project, you'll be using that site ID. Then another field on here is you can make this a non-billable project too as well. It could be just reporting purposes, so that non-billable is there as well. Once you have the front part information filled out, you can go into the project information options and have some more setup information that you can do. You can have a maximum billable. This allows you to enter an amount that you don't want to go over billable If you have a certain amount that you set right, that'll bring up a warning message letting you know that you are over your max billable and won't allow you to bill more unless you enter the password. You also make this project tax exempt as well, so that way none of the tax information will be used on any of the transactions. As well as you can use different invoice formatting for your invoice support, but you have up to 20 different types of invoice formats that you can use, that you can customize however you see fit and make that for. So if you want to invoice different types of formats, you can create that, as well as these are available in Word template to make it easier for you to invoice as well. Then the next one is going to be a profit reckoning method. This is going to determine how you want to enter or recognize your revenue based on that project. You have manual percent. This is just going to allow you to enter percent. If you want to see 10% recognize, 20%, just whenever you want to recognize it, you enter that percent and run that routine, and that will recognize that whatever percent that you enter. Percent of cost is basically going to calculate all the costs associated with that project and determine what percent that is of what is on the estimate, and then use that percent on the sales side to capture that side of the revenue. Then just the opposite, percent of sales, it's going to calculate the percent of what you estimated sales against the actual sales, and then use that for the determine the cost side as well. The non-WIP, this is when you're not using any profit rec. In project closure, this will determine the percent, or figure out the revenue based on the project closure. And a percent elapsed of time, this is where we're going to use that start date and due date. And as you enter the date on the profit recognition routine, it'll capture that data based on that, how long the elapsed time has gone on. For this purposes, we're just going to use the manual percent, but then we're also going to check the profit recognition by project line. This allows you to enter each individual estimate line and set a different percent or profit recognition method for that particular line. So you can have multiple different recognition routines on that estimate. And then this calculate on project currency, this will allow you to recognize that revenue with that currency that's available on that project. Otherwise, if this is not checked, it'll just use the functional currency of your company. Then retainage, this allows you to set a retainage amount or percent that won't be invoiced, and you can set that account to whatever you want that amount to go to once that retainage is posted. So that's basic project information setup on the project maintenance. The next thing you want to go into, once you have all the information set up for, is go into your project detail and create an estimate. This estimate is obviously going to pull in the currency, and the estimate date is going to be used from the user date. You can also, if you already have projects set up and they're all pretty much the same, you can do a copy from and pick a particular project, and then you could copy in the estimates from the other company. That way it's set, you don't have much setup information and have to manually key in every time if they are particular, or if they are the same. But then we're going to start entering our information. So basically the hierarchy goes the master project, and then it comes down to the phase would be the third level, and the task would be the fourth level. So you get some different hierarchy based on this thing. So our phase, I'm just going to enter one in here. On these phases, you can set the phase name, and then the cost classification. This will help you determine where this cost classification, so you can kind of use it on reporting purposes to kind of determine where all your stuff is going. And you also have these three that are options, as well as you have 3 other user-defined fields that you could set up to have 6 different cost classifications that you can use on this particular project to help you determine where your cost is going on that project. Then on your task level, you have a few more options. You can have this task name, as well as for time. If you're using a timesheets, you can have a default pay code associated with that particular task. So if you have one that's vacation or sick, you have that sick task, and then it'll default that pay code of sick leave, and it'll let you be in there. or automatically put it in for your timesheets. As well as your task, this task type is, let's just grab one here. This task type allows you to keep a particular task on a time materials project, so that way you can only use those on the time material type task, or a fixed price, or you can encompass all. This would be on a fixed price where you can use it on both on that estimate. On a particular task, you can, instead of using those counts that come out of the division part, you can actually set up the sales and the cost side of each individual task. You can have pulling out different accounts, so you can have multiple tasks. They're using different accounts, so that way it kind of allows you to be more flexible with your count and which accounts you want to hit. You're also going to have an invoice description. This is for one of the invoice formats. You can have that automatically default in with that particular task, as well as you can have this particular task assigned to a particular phase, and that's the only one it can be used on. So we have our phase task. Now if we wanted to set up a purchase order, we can automatically create one with this vendor ID, which we'll create one right here. So these are pulled as well from Great Plains. All your vendor IDs from Great Plains. You can zoom back in on that. You can see the information on the Great Plains side. But you also could have a particular person or job title that you're for timesheets. Stuff that they have their own estimate line on there, so you can determine how much that resource is using for costs associated or sales. And then with that purchase order, then we can add our item number. Since we have this multi-currency, we didn't have it set up, so we had to set up that multi-currency part for that particular item. But this is, again, this is pulling from Great Plains inventory maintenance. And then we can give it a quantity of 10. And then you have your invoice description. This allows you to, what is shown on the invoice format, or on the invoice. So you can have whatever line you want to put associated with that invoice. So we're just going to add one and saying invoicing and then this particular line would show up on your invoice for this particular estimate when you're actually invoicing that line. Now, like we talked about, that by project line, you can set up that different type of profit recognition routine. You can click on that little arrow button, and this allows you to set this one. I want this a percent of cost instead of manual percent that I want. So then I can set that particular line to percent of cost. Then we can have one that just has the phase. Since we don't need a task associated, we can just have a phase one. In this one, we're just going to have one quantity of 1, cost of 200, or a cost of 100 and 200 that we can use later on. And I forgot to put an invoice. So that invoice, you don't have to put that invoice description in there. You can actually do that on the invoice window if you wanted to. It's up to you how you want to set it. And again, you can set that routine. I'm going to keep this one manual percent, but this line would be manual percent. And then our first one would be percent of cost. Then you can store as many invoice or estimates as you want. You can have as many lines as you want. And then once we're done with this one, we want to post it. You print that estimate out. You also print the quote out if you want to for that estimate. But once we post it, it's going to ask you to create a purchase order. This will automatically create a PO into the Great Plains side to get that side going. And also on this particular, so now we can go back and look at our change estimate and see all those things. As you can see, they exchanged, and you also could put it back in functional if you want to see it in either one. You also can print that in that multi-currency or in that functional. And now we have our basic project information set up, and now we're able to perform different types of transactions to start entering the cost as well as the sales side for this particular project inside Great Plains. And this will be the conclusion of the project setup demonstration. If you want further information on setting up different types of transactions, you can click on the other videos for those demonstrations. Thank you.